You are already limiting screen time. You are reading labels. You are doing what a good parent does. However, your child is still struggling to focus, still melting down over small things, and still wired at bedtime and exhausted by morning. What most parents believe about sugar in children is not just incomplete, it is the exact reason they keep looking in the wrong place. If this goes unaddressed, the part of your child's brain responsible for managing emotion and making decisions does not just develop slowly, it develops differently, permanently. Luckily, the solution is already in your kitchen, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly what it is, what to change, and what it changes in your child's brain when you do. But before we dive in, if you want to give your child the best start possible, consider subscribing. I make the most straightforward parenting videos you will find on YouTube. So let's start with the morning you probably do not think twice about. Your child wakes up and you make breakfast. The cereal goes in the bowl, the yogurt goes on the side, the juice goes in the cup. You picked all three because they looked like reasonable choices. The cereal says whole grain on the box. The yogurt has fruit in it. The juice says 100% fruit, no added sugar. You did what a careful parent does. That one meal, before your child has walked out the front door, has already delivered more sugar than the American Heart Association says a child should consume in an entire day. Not almost, more. The cereal alone brings 12 grams. The yogurt brings 10. The juice brings 22. That is 44 grams of sugar before 8 in the morning, from 3 foods you selected specifically because they seemed like the right call. And you have already seen what this does. You just did not know what you were looking at. The child who cannot hold it together by 4 in the afternoon, the one who melts down when the answer to something small is no, the one who sat next to you at the homework table and could not stay with it for more than a few minutes before the frustration became too big to manage, the one who is exhausted at dinner and then somehow impossible to settle at bedtime. You have been reading those moments as personality, as a phase, as just how they are right now. They are not personality. They are the tail end of a pattern that started at breakfast. Think of the breakfast table like a fuel gauge. You filled it. You can see the needle is up. But the fuel you put in is not what the engine was designed to run on, and by midday, the whole system is telling you exactly that, in the only language a child has. But none of that explains what is actually happening inside your child's brain right now. And until you understand that, the rest of this means nothing. So here is what is actually happening inside your child's brain when they eat that breakfast. Every time your child eats sugar, their brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is the chemical that signals reward. It is the feeling of something being good, something being worth doing again. In an adult brain, a dopamine spike from sugar creates a habit loop. Unpleasant, but manageable. In your child's brain, something more consequential is happening, because your child's brain is not a smaller version of yours. It is a brain that is still deciding what normal feels like. The dopamine system in a developing brain is being calibrated right now. It is learning, from repeated daily experience, what a reward is supposed to feel like. And when that system gets trained on sugar level spikes, it sets its baseline there. The brain starts to treat that level of stimulation as the standard. Everything that does not reach it starts to register as flat. This is why the child who has cereal and juice every morning can sit through a video game without blinking and cannot sit through a book for 4 minutes. The book is not boring. The book is just not producing what the brain has been trained to expect. A hug, a puzzle, finishing something they started. An ordinary moment that should feel good. All of it is running below the threshold that sugar set. That is not a focus problem. That is not a personality trait. That is miscalibrated wiring, built one breakfast at a time. And then there is what sugar does to the part of the brain responsible for making any of that learning stick in the first place. Your child's brain produces a protein called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You do not need to remember the name. What you need to know is what it does. Every time your child learns something, reads a word, processes a difficult emotion, figures out how to handle a social situation, BDNF is what makes that experience build into something lasting. It is the cement that sets the bricks. Without it, the learning happens, and then it does not hold the way it should. High sugar intake measurably suppresses BDNF production. The lessons are still being taught. Your child is still in the classroom, still at the table, still moving through the day. But the mechanism that converts that daily experience into lasting development is being quietly turned down by the same breakfast you made this morning. But knowing everything I told you so far does not matter if you cannot see why every careful parent is still missing it every single day. Because most parents have already heard that sugar does not cause hyperactivity. You probably heard it years ago, and it probably came as a relief. Because if sugar does not cause the bouncing off the walls behavior, then the juice box at the birthday party is fine, and the cereal in the morning is not something you need to revisit. That conclusion came from a study published in 1995, and it has been repeated so many times since that it has become the answer that closes the conversation before it starts. Here is what that study actually measured: short-term physical activity after sugar consumption. Researchers looked at whether children ran around more, moved more, bounced more in the hour or two after eating sugar. They did not find a significant difference. That part is accurate. What the study did not measure is everything that actually matters for your child's daily life. It did not measure attention span the following morning. It did not measure emotional regulation 2 hours after the meal. It did not measure how easily your child fell into deep sleep that night, or how much frustration they could hold before it spilled over during homework. The science that shapes your child's ability to learn, to feel steady, and to function in an ordinary day was never part of the study that told you sugar was not the problem. So the headline traveled, and the questions stopped being asked, and the cereal stayed in the cupboard. The second reason this gets missed is that the symptoms do not arrive in the category where parents think to look. The child who cannot finish a task, who cries harder than the situation calls for, who is exhausted by mid-afternoon and unreachable by evening. That child gets described as sensitive, strong-willed, just going through something. Those are personality labels, and they are applied to what is, in a significant number of cases, a physiological pattern playing out through behavior. The dietary thread never gets pulled because the behavior looks like a temperament story, not a biology story. And then there is the angle that almost no parent has been given because it does not come up at the pediatrician and it does not make it onto the cereal box. Roughly 90% of the body's serotonin is produced in the gut, not the brain. The gut lining is full of the microbes responsible for producing it, and those microbes depend on a diverse, balanced gut environment to do their job. Sugar is one of the primary drivers of gut microbiome disruption in children. It feeds the bacterial strains that crowd out diversity and degrades the environment that serotonin production depends on. The child who is emotionally brittle, who struggles with transitions, who seems to wake up on the wrong side of every morning. That child's gut is part of that story. Their serotonin production is being affected by the same daily pattern that is showing up as a mood problem. You have been managing the mood. Nobody told you to look at the gut. But the reason this goes unnoticed is only part of the problem, because what it is quietly building inside your child's brain is something no phase grows out of. There is a part of your child's brain that is still being built right now. It is called the prefrontal cortex, and it is the last region to fully develop. It handles impulse control, emotional regulation, planning, and the ability to tolerate frustration without falling apart. It is not finished developing until the mid-20s. What that means is that the brain your child is walking around with today is not a fixed thing. It is a construction site. And what happens on that site during childhood does not just influence the outcome, it determines it. Neural pathways are being formed, reinforced, and pruned right now based on what your child's brain experiences every day. The pathways that get the most traffic are the ones that strengthen. The ones that go quiet get cut. This is not a flaw in how the brain works. It is exactly how it is supposed to work. The problem is that chronic neuroinflammation from sustained high sugar intake does not pause that process. It redirects it. The pathways being reinforced are the ones built around high stimulation reward. The ones responsible for sitting with discomfort, delaying gratification, and managing emotion without an immediate release are getting less traffic every day that the pattern continues. Go back to the breakfast table. Not as a single meal, but as a pattern that has been running for years. A child who has spent 5 years consuming more than their daily recommended sugar limit before school has spent 5 years training a developing prefrontal cortex in one direction. The child who cannot regulate at 10 years old did not arrive there suddenly. They were pointed there, gradually, by a daily pattern that nobody asked you to question. And it does not stop at waking hours. Every night your child sleeps after a high-sugar day, their brain moves through sleep differently. Deep sleep is the phase where the brain consolidates what it learned. It takes the experiences of the day and builds them into memory, into understanding, into the kind of knowledge that is still there the next morning. Sugar disrupts that phase specifically. The homework you sat through together, the social moment they navigated at school, the reading lesson that felt like it was finally clicking. All of it needed that night to cement. And the night was compromised by the same morning that started it. So now you know what is being built. But knowing that and doing nothing with it is the most expensive mistake a parent can make inside this specific window. Here is what the research actually shows happens inside your child's brain when you remove the high sugar load for 14 days, not gradually over months, not eventually, on a specific, trackable timeline that most parents have never been given. Days 1 through 3 are the hardest. Your child may be more irritable, more tired, and more insistent about sweet foods than usual. This is the part where most parents assume the change is making things worse. It is not. It is the dopamine system recalibrating. The brain is looking for the signal it was receiving and not finding it, and it registers that absence the same way it registers any kind of withdrawal. If your child is crankier on day 2 than they were before you started, you are not failing. You are on day 2 of something that is working. That window has a biological endpoint of roughly 72 hours. Hold it. Days 4 through 7 are when the gut begins to shift. The bacteria that thrive on sugar start losing ground. The strains responsible for producing serotonin begin recovering. You will not see a dramatic behavioral change in this window, but there is one signal that tends to appear earlier than any other: sleep. Parents commonly report that somewhere in the first week, their child begins sleeping more deeply, waking less often through the night, or waking in a noticeably calmer state in the morning. That is not a coincidence. It is the first visible sign that the connection between the gut and the brain is moving in the right direction. Days 7 through 10 bring the dopamine reset. The reward threshold normalizes back toward baseline. This is when parents often notice their child showing genuine interest in foods they previously refused entirely. A piece of fruit registers as sweet now in a way it did not before. Cheese, eggs, and whole foods start feeling satisfying rather than boring. Emotional reactivity begins decreasing in a way that feels different from a good day. It starts feeling like a slightly different child. Days 11 through 14 are when the attention window opens. A child who could not stay inside something frustrating for more than a few minutes begins stretching that window. The building crew is back at work. The wiring that was being suppressed is being laid again. However, knowing what happens inside your child's brain across those 14 days means nothing if you do not know how to actually get through them. The grocery shop is not where this gets hard. At the grocery shop, you have time. You have the list, and everything you just learned is still fresh. Where it actually gets hard is Wednesday afternoon, when your child comes home from school upset, and the fastest way to shift their mood is the snack they always get. It is the birthday party, where the cake is the social centerpiece, and saying no feels like you are taking something away from them in front of everyone. It is the Saturday morning, when you did not sleep well, nobody is at their best, and the cereal is already in the cupboard with 20 minutes before the day has to begin. Those are the moments where the knowledge you have does not automatically become an easy decision. So here is what each of them actually looks like in practice. When your child comes home upset and reaching for something sweet, the instinct to give it to them is not wrong. The need underneath that request is real. They have had a long day and they want to feel better. What works in that moment is movement first. 5 minutes outside, a quick run, anything physical before the snack conversation happens. Movement produces dopamine. It meets the same need the sugar was going to meet, without training the reward system to reach for food every time something feels hard. If they still need a snack after that, whole fruit with something that has fat or protein alongside it covers it. The sweetness is there. The spike and the crash that follows it are not. The birthday party and the school lunch and the playdate spread are a different situation entirely, because you do not control those environments, and attempting to police them produces its own cost. A child who feels watched and different at every social occasion is a child building a complicated relationship with food that will outlast your 14 days. The approach here is not prohibition. It is proportion. At home, during these 2 weeks, you are removing the baseline. The occasional birthday cake does not undo what you are building. It is the daily pattern that reshapes the brain, not the exception. Let the exception be an exception, and hold the pattern at home. The moment that trips most parents is not the party or the upset afternoon. It is their own exhaustion. The night you did not prep anything. The morning that started 20 minutes late and sideways. The Thursday where the 14 days quietly became 4, and you are not sure exactly when that happened. That is not failure. The recalibration does not reset to 0 the moment you miss a day. What you built on the days you held it is still there. The days you did not are just days. What matters is coming back to the morning, not that you held it without a single slip. Picture the child you are going to pick up from school at the end of these 14 days. The one who gets in the car without the crash, who sits down for homework without the wall of resistance at the end of it, who sleeps through the night and wakes up ready instead of already depleted. That is not a different child. That is the same child, with the system finally running on what it was always supposed to run on. You did not change who they are. You changed the conditions they were operating in. And that is something you had the ability to do the whole time.